After assessing the countries around the realm, we can find many similarities in the architecture and the building style from previous cultures, presenting us with identical ways of building, far more advanced than that of today, with much more attention to detail, suggesting that perhaps there was once a unified civilization. The same can be said when looking into megalithic structures. Contrary to most beliefs, they too can be found around the realm with similar characteristics and outlandish cover-up stories, being a little more challenging to find due to using the camouflage of Mother Nature. We can find evidence poking out in all kinds of unusual locations. After discovering the sites, modern-day historians often attribute them simply to be solar calendars, burial sites, or for religious purposes. But keep in mind that the architects of them are said to be primitive men, without the use of advanced technology, leading it harder to believe the official narrative that they were able to not only carve and quarry them, seemingly without any difficulty, but then able to move these multiple-ton megalithic blocks. After analysing today's examples, it is up to you to make your own conclusions. A more well-known megalithic site being Stonehenge attracts a lot of attention despite its more recent history. However, just 3 kilometers away lies a site that goes by the name of Superhenge, acquiring the name due to it once being made up from over 90 stones, some as large as 4 meters, supposedly later being intentionally buried to create an earthen bank. Reasons are unknown. Some sites showing more feats of incredible structural engineering can be observed in Japan, at the sites of Nijo Castle and Nagoya Castle. A temple structure sits on top of what can only be described as a curved wall. For most people, it is easy to dismiss the megalithic stonework that was built during the Edo period, not what you would typically expect the samurai to be building. Again, taking a closer look, we can see the intricate detail of this site, which that of today's architecture doesn't come close to rival it. For comparison, let's observe the methods in which we move large objects using today's modern technology. We can see that with advanced machinery and technology, it proves to be quite a challenge. To suggest that the megalithic stones were moved by men deserves to be speculated. If it was successful in the past and they were able to move and create these unimaginable structures, why is it that we cannot replicate it with today's advancements? With that in mind, we can look at Peru for further examples. Apparently before the Incas, a tribe named Quilque was said to have built this wall. These walls are made up from large irregular blocks, so intricately put together that something as thin as a piece of paper cannot be placed between them. This was originally thought to have been a fortress. Later suggestions saying it perhaps was a temple to worship the sun. Using the people here for a size comparison, we can see the sheer size of this site. Over in Ethiopia, a lesser known but huge large stele have been put up there reportedly during the 4th century. This location also boasts one of the largest obelisks in the world, simply named the Obelisk of Axum. Believe it or not, it is said to have been carved from one single solid block, which was quarried several miles south before being transported. Said to have been built in a way to show off their power to other societies, during the time being one of the most developed cities in the world. The design itself can only be described as a 9-story building. Each story of the building appears to have a frame with structural supports and windows, all of which are but carved outlines. Some even as intricate as to have false locks being carved into them. Other obelisks can be found in obtuse locations such as Buenos Aires, this being much more recent than previous examples, Construction began March 1936 and was completed after just 31 days. At a height of 67 meters and the structure primarily being made from concrete and Orlean white stone, it seems fairly plausible. With a little bit of digging, we can find that there was a site previously standing before. Well. A church, St. Nicholas of Bari, built in 1721. Of course, this had to be demolished in 1931 when the streets were widened. This resulted in the erection of the obelisk over the previous site, which commemorates the 400th anniversary of the city, adding further evidence of the cover-up of the old world, removing the beauty of before, replacing it with an eyesore. We won't spend too much time on this example, but to further amount our evidence, we can pile this onto the list. It is important to note that mainstream historians are in fact unsure and still to this day skeptical about how they were able to construct such architecture with limited resources and skills. Many theories speculate that they were able to move the stones weighing from 2 tons up to 70 tons using a variety of different methods. They range from different theories using wooden rollers, using labour from huge working animals, a pull-push method, and others suggesting levitation or even alien technology. Laughable that this isn't a talking point. No modern-day historians know how this was built, yet they go about their daily lives thinking they live in the most advanced generation. With the size of some of the quarried stone, and the way it is designed with such beauty and care to detail, it appears otherworldly, unable to ever be replicated. After watching these clips for just a few seconds, we can rest assured that this was made by a far more advanced civilization, whose history has been purposely covered up to follow the mainstream narrative. Tucked away in the forests of Siberia lies some of the largest unknown megalithic structures in the world, some suggesting the stones on this site are larger than that of Baalbek. According to official narratives, Siberia was largely unpopulated and the area of the discovery only became public during the early 1970s. There is an argument that this is a creation simply from Mother Nature. Some of the blocks present themselves with perfect right angles, not commonly found in nature, as well as what appears to be corridors, flat surface rocks, and some weighing up to 3,000 to 4,000 tons, stacked one on top of each other up to 40 meters high. Further mystery is added when listening to Georgy Sidorov, who surveyed the site. This interview contains many golden nuggets of information about the site and should shed more light about the location. The way in which he describes the site from a first-hand perspective is truly astonishing.
Для своих людей. И туда хлынули наши люди из Междуреченска, например, из Москов, из Новокузнецка. Они остолбенели, когда увидели вот эти руины. Но сначала была инерция мышления. Люди ходили, смотрели, чесали репу, не могли понять. Глаза смотрят, а сознание не... У меня вот насколько уже нервная система ко всему уже привычная, когда я там оказался, я остолбенел просто. Это шок. Это удар кувалдой по голове. Глаза смотрят, а что-то внутри говорит, ну этого не может быть. И вот такая беда была с нашими геологами. Они поднялись, посмотрели, почесали репу. А потом, когда они узнали про наши удары сверхмощного оружия, то ли термоядерного, то ли плазмоиды атаковали, то ли лазеры нет, лазеры мы резали. Там еще взрывная волна. Может, часть стены вырвана, например, и она улетела метров на 500, камнями разбросаны. И эти кирпичи лежат, потом еще одна часть стены. То есть попадение мощных каких-то ракет или чего-то очень давно. А наверху этот гранит, он горел, он просто горел, до сих пор белый.
He begins to mention the measurements and conditions of the blocks too.
1000 с лишним метров, стоят стены. Стены, некоторые глыбы, некоторые камни внизу, вырезанные кирпичи, они 2000 тонн. Не 1000, как Бальбеки, до 2000 тонн. А 1000 тонн это нормальный средний вес, понимаете? Вот. Ну, там 500 тонн, 600 тонн, 700 именно по объему, если считать, то вот такие. Вот. Две кладки, полигональная такая кладка, кладка вот наподобие вот такой тоже есть. И все это замками, все это сделано намертво стоит. Но печально то, что...
The interviewer then asks if he thinks it was a town or fortress. His answer may come as a surprise, however.
И этот комплекс Шори вы расцениваете как огромный город или...
Нет, это энергоцентрали, там городов там пока нет, мы не видели городов. Там, вот если шумерские поселения,
Да.
они один на одном, они буквально там через 3 километра, 2, там стоят стены, там дома стоят, там жили люди в свое время, все стоит, лежат керамические эти самые, среднего.
На средней объем наш.
То здесь мы не нашли вот,
признаков быта.
Признаков быта нет. Здесь только гигантские мегалиты, и что это, скорее всего, это какие-то энергетические установки, устройства. Но это наше предположение, мы не знаем, что это. Надо разбираться.
Some other anomalies he discovered.
Поток энергии очень сильный из-под земли. Деревья стоят просто, вот не верите, вот камень стоит сверху дерева, на камне. Корни в воздухе, дерево вот такое.
На камне.
На камне вообще нет почвы. Как это объяснить? Фотографии мне, посмотрите, фотографии же есть. Вообще дерево живое, растет, благоухает. Как оно живет? На камне, просто на камне. То есть настолько жизненная энергия огромная, какая-то из-под земли.
And when further examining the large granite blocks, some more truths were found.
Когда мы стали проверять компасом, руины показали отрицательное магнитное поле, причем постоянное отрицательное. Как? Почему? Непонятно.
The fact is, however, Georgi stated only about 1% of the area has been examined, leaving many more questions to be answered. When thinking of megalithic structures, China doesn't often come to mind, although evidence can be found with misconstrued stories explaining the large megaliths in this area too. The official story begins in 1405, during the reign of the third emperor of China's Ming dynasty. By order of Zhu Di, they were to quarry a giant stele to show respect to his deceased father. They were given the mammoth task to cut 3 separate pieces of rock, the base weighing 16,000 tons. If completed, it was suspected to have had a height of 73 meters, weighing 31,000 tons in total. After most of the quarrying had been completed, the next task was then to move them into position. The architects realized the feat of their task and rightly considered it unachievable, thus abandoning the megalithic structures where they lay. If you're not scratching your head after listening to this story, then I can't help you. Several red flags should go up if this were to be historically accurate. What made the architects think they could move such a large structure, let alone moving it 20 kilometers through a mountain? Surely they could foresee the impossible task of moving such an enormous stone before attempting to quarry it. According to specialists on the subject, the cuts on the stone vary in different shapes and sizes, and the placements show that they were never intended to be put together or even moved. Taking a look at these pictures from the 1920s, we can see some weathering on the surface. What is interesting to note is the area is completely devoid of trees, a different environment from what we see today. Even the mountainside, completely barren. Could we suggest there has been an attempt to cover this up? This is a common theme with areas similar to this, just letting nature take its course. Today we will be looking at a prehistoric rock sanctuary site located on the southern Black Sea coast of Bulgaria, surveyed by none other than myself. Although not as impressive in stature as the previous examples, it should be encouraging to go and do your own research wherever you may be. Seemingly in the middle of nowhere, masked by nature's camouflage of trees and shrubbery, lies a very peculiar sight. Searching between the thickets and bushes, we can see large stones dotted about. On the surface, it seems to be just a small site, although as we dive deeper, we couldn't help but notice huge rock after huge rock. This path led for about 30 minutes until finally reaching the coastline, where we couldn't believe what we saw. First recorded in the 19th century by a Czech historian Karel Škopil, who produced the first scientific account of the sanctuary. The first excavations of the site took place much later, starting in 2003, mostly unearthing a whole range of artifacts, which is typical of Thracian sanctuaries. Historians suggest that Thracians regarded that the stones had embodied divine power from a great goddess. However, geologists state it is a natural rock formation that consists of hardened magma that erupted from a Mesozoic era volcano. So it is challenging to tell which is man-made and which is natural, as they say. Thracians added their finishing touches by carving niches, stone graves, canals for sacrificial blood and wine, and circular altar holes. Looking for yourself, it is easy to dismiss this simply as a story. When approaching the site, we can see the rocks being slightly covered, almost indicating there is more to see beneath the ground. It even appears that we could be walking on a huge rock itself. Due to it being unmaintained for however long, the area is surrounded by trees, covering the rocks that go on for many acres. Comparing them to other sites around the world, it is clear to see them as large blocks, rather than a formation from molten volcanic magma. The fact that it has been investigated for just 20 years could suggest they would rather sweep this area under the rug, to say. Despite it being hard to find, many tourists are attracted to it, leading it harder to appreciate the site. From a bird's eye view, we can see how it has been engulfed by nature and hidden from passing spectators. Imagine, for instance, the site bare of any trees, like the pictures from the site in China. What more could we uncover? As we head deeper into the forests, there lies more pieces of the puzzle scattered around. You can begin to wonder if it really was a natural phenomenon, or maybe, similar to previous sites, a hidden piece of history. The rocks here are off-grid, to say, and are not spoken of as much. You really have to go deep to find them. You can spend a lot of time there. Interestingly, the geological sites that are deeper are even more impressive and deserve more attention. This part is nearly impossible to find due to it being on an off-beaten track without any signs giving directions. Stubborn in our efforts, we were determined to reach the end and see what more secrets we could find. Walking through the final passage of trees down a dusty path, we reached the coastline. Unexpectedly, it was full of different shaped rocks, perhaps some looking familiar to other locations around the world. Not only is this site covered by dense forests, but also submerged underwater. We could go as far to say as an artificial coastline. Taking a closer examination, we can find many unique anomalies, from straight carved lines to symmetrical patterns, burn marks, rocks that appear to have been cut into thirds, as well as a number of others to list. As previously explained, the site we are observing here is not a well-known site, yet lies many mysteries to help us eventually uncover the past. To round up today's video, we have one more boots on the ground example that may raise some eyebrows. The site under question is Vitosha, located next to the capital Sofia, towering over the city with a height of 2,200 meters, following the trail through the beautiful tracks enclosed by covering evergreen trees, stopping to see the many scenic views of the city below, eventually leading us to the peak of a rather peculiar sight to behold. Walking along the path ascending towards the peak, we can admire many scenic views of the city below. As we venture closer to the top, we can begin to see some rock structures that appear to be out of place. Getting closer, we can see some rocks in an unnatural location, seemingly as if someone has placed them there, the size of small cars placed together forming mounds surrounding the landscape, as well as scattered in between. Along the path towards the peak of the mountain, a rather interesting sight can be seen. A river, but not the typical river one would normally see. Rather than a flowing stream of water, a sight of boulders can be seen for a stretch of a few kilometers, named a stone river, said to be formed from many thousands of years of erosion due to the natural elements. Here the footage doesn't do it justice for how unbelievable this sight truly is. Boulders varying from different sizes, all aligned in a straight line going down the side of the mountain. What could have caused such a phenomenon? Is this evidence of a past building that has been demolished, one similar to that in Siberia? Or perhaps a tall tower that once stood mighty, towering above the landscape below? Your guess is as good as mine. Along the other side of the mountain, another stone river can be observed. This mountain alone giving evidence to multiple examples of large-scale stones flowing from the mountain range. Finally reaching the peak, we can see further examples of huge-scale rocks seemingly placed one on top of each other. The mountain peak providing more scenic views of many megalithic stones. As if the site couldn't get any more interesting, pile of boulders after pile of megalithic boulders. Unknown truly how they got there in the first place from a mainstream angle, seeming rather similar again to the site in Siberia, but on a smaller scale. Perhaps once an ancient fortress, with the rocks looking like they have been thrown around, scattering the mountain's peak. Endless amounts of examples can be found, each one more impressive than the last. Left on top of the peak, far away from any questions, some with clear evidence of unnatural behavior, straight lines stacked one on top of another, cast away simply as a natural creation. Unexplained fully how these stones were once formed, an alternative perspective is required to fill in. From a spiritual sense, perhaps this is how our vibration decodes this information. We see them as clumps of rock smashed together, maybe on a higher vibration of awareness, we would witness this fully built. But being on a lower, negative, denser vibration, this is what we observe. When looking at the mountain peak, we can see many examples of huge scale rocks visible. However, unearthing and looking underground, perhaps there are more pieces of evidence we can find. But for now, what is visible to the naked eye provides much evidence of some mystery. Simply left at the top of a mountain. Hopefully, after looking at today's pieces of evidence, one can begin to question the realm they live in. The landscape that surrounds us may not be so natural after all, simply being covered up, appearing on the surface as though that is all to see. But when uncovering the land, many mysteries are left for one to find, history that has been hidden and eventually forgotten. Once you see it, you cannot unsee it.